Excellent. So welcome back. Today we are talking about this is our Fix Your Funnel workshop, which actually previous to this year was always your holding pattern workshop, because everybody's funnel, everybody that we've done a scorecard for, and every client that we've ever looked at, the place where their funnel needs to be fixed the most is in their holding pattern. So even if they're doing an okay job of prospecting and approaching and everything else, it kind of falls apart at the holding pattern. And, that is not unusual. And that happens for a lot of good reasons. I think when anybody learns marketing in school, the two examples that they always use, or at least at the university I went to, were Coca-Cola and Wells Fargo. And the problem with that is that Coca-Cola is not really marketing. It is just sales. All you have to do to sell Coca-Cola is to put out a Coca-Cola sign. They've been doing marketing for more than 100 years. Everybody.
Trivia. Let's do a trivia.
Yeah.
Coca-Cola, when I went through business school,
Mhm.
they spend 70 cents out of every revenue dollar on marketing.
Exactly.
Now, who can afford to do that?
Right.
I mean, come on.
Yeah. And our clients, as just in contrast, probably spend less than 10% of their revenue on marketing. If that, it's actually kind of unusual in the aviation industry to have the kind of margins to spend 10% on marketing. But what that does is, if your education has been in those other brands, those are retail brands. Everybody knows exactly what a Coca-Cola is, anywhere in the world. It's one of the most recognizable brands there is, and they've been advertising for hundreds of years. Same thing with Wells Fargo in the United States. It's one of the oldest banks and, most well recognized and everything else. So everybody needs a bank account, of some kind. They need a checking account or a card or a home loan, or they need something from a bank. So everybody's familiar with it. Our clients are in the opposite situation. In a lot of cases, people don't know what they do or why they need it. So, there's a completely different scenario. And what that leads to, one of the biggest differences between aviation marketing and any other kind of marketing is the sales cycle. So, you guys can think about your favorite client or maybe one of the clients that you take care of, and think about, what is their sales cycle from the time that they meet somebody for the first time, they first show up on their website, to the time that they actually get a check or, are executing a transaction with someone. And you may not know this, but, you can sometimes guess that it's several interactions. I will tell you, for us, it used to be 8 months, was our sales cycle. We've actually shortened that for some of our products, like personal branding. It is more along the lines of 1 to 3 months. For our larger products like, titanium and things like that, it's still about 8 months, but we're trying to reduce that amount of time for our smaller products. Okay, so hopefully you guys have downloaded the workbook and you guys have that in front of you, so we'll be using that today as well. So this will be fun, and you can do this for, if you have your own business, Adila, I know you do, or for a client. So, get a client in mind that you know pretty well, and, think about them as kind of your example as we're going through this today. So far, so good? All set? All right, cool. Okay, so what we're going to be talking about is, what are the goals of this phase, of this pink phase of the holding pattern? We'll talk about what we don't want. We'll talk about why closing techniques don't work and how to create urgency without them. And also why we need to sometimes create urgency. We'll talk about topics and delivery methods for the holding pattern. So it's not always, so are we ready to start yet? Are we ready to start yet? Are we ready to start yet? Did you buy my thing yet? Did you buy my thing yet? Did you buy my thing yet? Which is really annoying for everyone. We'll work through some worksheets of examples and building your own holding patterns, and we'll talk about the different KPIs or uh, key performance indicators of a holding pattern, and we'll talk about automating and delegating pieces of the holding pattern. So let's go ahead and dive in. All right. So you guys have probably all seen this. We just did our prospecting workshop last month where we talked about the goal of an approach is one of three responses, right? A yes or a no or a not yet. And any of those is a good response. You don't want to be selling to people who are not a good fit. So a no is perfectly fine. We used to always feel bad about no's, and if you're selling Coca-Cola, then you can feel bad about getting a no. No, I don't really want the Coke. Okay, fine. But if you're selling aviation stuff, you're going to get a lot of no's because they're not a good fit. The aircraft or the product isn't right for the situation. Lots of different things. So a no is a perfectly fine answer, and we can never take that personally. Even if we get a dozen no's a day, that's totally fine. Yeses are better, of course, but the vast majority of people that learn about our product or service for the first time, and this is true whether it is SSC or Vision or any of our clients, the vast majority of customers, the first time they run into them, are going to say, "That sounds like a good idea. I need to think about it." Or, "Not yet," is the response that they're giving with that. And that sounds different in a lot of situations. So it might be, let me think about it. Let me consult with somebody else. Let me look at 3 other vendors. Let me, consult my budget. Let me figure out how much we're actually spending on this and get back to you. You guys probably have different examples of not yets and what they sound like. They may not sound like not yets. But these happen as a result of phone calls, as a result of emails, as a result of any of the other marketing that we're doing. And we may not actually hear it. It's just what's going on in the customer's head. So these are some of the reasons that we get those not yets. I don't know if anybody has any favorite um, stories or anything else about things that you've run into where a potential client says, "I don't trust you yet," or, "I need to run this by my accountant," or "My hair is on fire with a dozen other things." That's always my favorite. Everybody's always running around with a lot more work than they can accomplish at any particular time. Do you get
I
that?
I have
Yeah.
I have a story. There was one client that said to me, "I cannot trust you with my account yet," and now I have been working with them for more than 3 years.
I think I know who that client might be. So that I was giving you the side eye for, probably 6 months before we started working together, and it was
1 month,
9
1 month,
months. Okay.
1 month, one.
1 month.
Yes, yes,
All right, well, you got my trust much more quickly than anybody else does, so,
yeah.
um yeah, and that is always, it's nothing personal, it's just there's so many things being sold on the internet, nowadays,
Yes.
and I wouldn't know it I did not know Adila from, 100 other people until I'd seen her work, over the course of a month, so that was very impressive that that happened. With a lot of our clients, it's complexity, so, you look at Basque or Vision or DBT is something new, something that people haven't seen before. So it takes them some time to really understand how does this work and how does this fit. And this isn't something that is just simply a replacement for something else I've been doing. I have to rethink my whole business in order to use this product or service. Um, of course, we always want them to consider alternatives. We want, them to not regret their choices, and sometimes we even encourage that. One of the ways we do that is with a shopping checklist. Um, John and I were at a home show last weekend, and there were a lot of people selling these holiday lights that they put on your house. And there's a bunch of different vendors that do this, and I like going to these things because I like listening to how people sell. And one vendor gave us a checklist, and says, "Here are the things that you need to look for." And this is something that you really only buy once. Nobody gets holiday lights for their house like every year or whatever. They buy them once and then they stay there for a long time. So this checklist had things like, does this, how weatherproof is this? What are the hourly ratings on each of the bulbs? Are the connectors whatever, John, you probably remember better than I do what some of the things were that were on that list. But they were things that I wouldn't have never thought to ask.
But generically, it's exactly the list that you send out for marketing
Mhm,
when you send out a blue folder. You select the things you want people to compare,
mhm,
and then they compare that, and of course, you're best.
mhm. And that's something we've done for a few of our clients over the years, but, I think, it's a really powerful thing is to say, "I know you're shopping. You should be. Here are the things that you should take into consideration. How old is the company? Do you have references? Are you a member of these particular organizations? Do you um, have what are the criteria that I should be looking for when I'm looking for this particular product or service? Because I may not know as a customer. This is my first time shopping for this, or, I don't buy an airplane every year. Even the people that buy planes frequently do it every 3 or 4 years, I think is the usual span of time for buying and selling aircraft, even for a fleet. So it's been a couple years since they've done this before, and then there's always new technology and always new things that they don't know what they should be looking for, even if they've been in the business for, 50 years. They're new to this time, of buying this product or service. Scheduling problems, they may have an approval process they have to go through. They may have a lack of clarity about how this is going to benefit them or how this is going to fit into their return on investment. They may have cash flow issues. That happens with businesses all the time. There's so many things that we want to buy, so many pieces of software and, we'd love to get a website, another web developer, but, that's on the whiteboard of things that we're gonna buy at some point when we have the money. But, there are other things that have a higher priority, like the trip to the Philippines, so we have our list of things that we want to buy, and this just happens to be further down the list than other things. And our hair is always on fire, because we're always way too busy with way too many things. So those are the reasons that it takes so long. And it's not because, people aren't interested, and it's not because, we're doing a bad job of marketing necessarily. It's just because they have these things on their plate.
And you gotta be ready for the question.
Which question is that?
"Okay, I'm ready now. How do I make this work?"
Exactly, okay. Exactly, and that happens when you least expect it. Alright. So
Um,
what go ahead, Adila.
Around a year ago, I had this prospect, and they outreached me. They outreached themselves to me on LinkedIn, and they came to me after watching my videos that I posted, and then like they were very enthusiastic, and they were so collaborative, and there were so many meetings. I think so. We had I had 3 meetings with them, and then they agreed to work with me, and then we decided on a budget, and then I sent them the payment details and everything, uh, and then there was a no-show, like, no contact from them and nothing, and I was like, "Oh, what just happened?" So, like, why something like that would happen?
Right. It was one of these things. I can guarantee you it was one of these things. I don't know which one. For us, for example, we just got a bid on, something for the house, and it was reasonable, for what it was and everything else.
Oh, was it?
But we've had well, okay. Assuming that it was reasonable, I'm making this plausible, but anyway, other things come up, we have a situation where we have to pay for something more immediately. We've got kids and parents, we've got, unexpected expenses, we've got other things that happen, we've got a business, we've got, trips that need to happen, and we don't always stay in touch with all of our vendors, they're not always top of our list of people to call and say, "Hey, we're going to California for 2 weeks," or whatever the situation is. So we might ghost people who are vendors for us.
And there's another generic reason people
Ghost.
ghost,
Yeah.
but they don't call back, and that reason is because you don't wanna hear somebody trying to sell you more because, "Well, we can do this or we can do that." You're just done. You don't want 'em to have to put up with it, so you don't call them back.
Yeah. So, the rules of etiquette are that you let people know what's going on, but even my dad, who was a very, very polite person, he I remember when I was a little kid, I don't remember how old I was, but, he was dealing with someone that was trying to sell him a car or a truck or something, and it was at a dealership. And, he got a call from this person, and I gave him the message. He had called while my dad was out, and he said, "Oh, I don't need to call him back. He's a salesperson." So it was like, even for people who are very polite, the rules of etiquette don't apply to salespeople, uh, for a lot of people, and we can't take that personally. That's just kind of a cultural thing. I don't know if that's true other places in the world, but certainly in the United States,
Yep.
people don't feel obligated to be courteous to salespeople. It's, and I think it's because there's also a lot of salespeople who are not courteous. So, there's kind of that reputation of, I don't have to follow the standard rules of polite society because this is not a.
So, and car salesmen are the worst. I mean,
Mhm.
they gave salespeople a bad name over years and years and years,
Mhm.
which is too bad, but it happened.
Yeah, exactly. And so we kind of get painted with that same brush a lot of times. If we're in sales, and we are, marketing is part of sales. A lot of people see sales and marketing as part of the same umbrella. So there is a cultural thing that we just have to recognize and, understand that it's not personal. It's just positional.
There was another company. There was this guy, and he does the charter. Like he was in charter brokerage in
Mhm.
USA. And so what happened? We had a meeting, and he was also very excited. And then we decided on a budget. I decided on a budget with him as well. Like the it was very collaborative, and I was very, you can say, considerable of what he can pay and everything. And then we scheduled a meeting to like do everything like finalized, and he blocked me on LinkedIn, he blocked me on WhatsApp, he
No.
blocked me on Instagram. I was blocked everywhere.
Right. So, and this happens as well. Sometimes people will, when you're having that conversation about the budget or you're having that price negotiation, they will want to be getting along with you because they're in a conversation, they're being overly polite, and, they want you to be impressed with them, they want you to be impressed with their business, they will tell you they can afford more than they can, sometimes. It's just something that people do, and, we just have to recognize that sometimes they're not telling the truth about their budget, about what they can actually spend, and then they're embarrassed because they told you something that wasn't true. They just got caught up in the moment and, in this conversation, um, they exaggerated or they lied, whatever you wanna call it. But either way, now they're embarrassed, so they're gonna block you and they don't wanna have anything to do with you because of their embarrassment. That's not about you,
Yeah.
that's about them. So, what we do, and this actually was, covered in what was his name? Bigelow, David Bigelow. Do you remember him, John, from Sandler Sales? Did a really good workshop about this. And he said, you really need to diffuse the situation, especially if you think somebody is lying to you in a sales meeting, and just say, "Okay, so let's take that number and take 75% of it or take half of it and say, what can we do with that?" And if you think that somebody's exaggerating or somebody's lying to you, and the more experience you have, the better you can kind of spot this. Um, Take their budget in half, and say, "Okay, so let's assume that, you go through your numbers and everything else. Let's see what we can do with half of that number." and go forward with that. Then you at least get a sale, or you at least get something out of the deal. But again, that's kind of an advanced technique. Often taking people at their word is a better idea. But if you're getting the vibe, that they're trying to impress you, or that they may not be accurate, and usually, especially in aviation, the numbers are public. You know how big their company is. A lot of them are public companies that file annual reports, and you have an idea of where they are. But even so, you don't know what their budget is because you don't know what they've spent on everything else. So, But anyway, yeah, that's a good, excellent point. All right. So if
And
we
rarely a
yeah.
client isn't a good fit.
Mhm.
I mean, even in car, I mean, I wasn't a very good car salesman. I sold used cars for a while,
Mhm.
and I remember this lady came in with a truck, and she was looking at a new truck, and she said, uh, I don't know, she was looking at this new truck, and she started getting teary-eyed, and I said, "Well, what's wrong?" He said, "Well, I don't know how I can afford this." I said, "Well, what's wrong with this one?" And
What's
she
wrong with your
told
current truck? Right.
yeah, and, I said, "Well, why don't you do this? It won't cost you anything, and if it fixes it, then it'll be, a one-time charge." And, she just got really emotional and said, "Thank you, I didn't know what to do." So, she never came back, so I suspected it was a simple problem, but she didn't know,
Mhm.
and I did, and, of course, my boss got all, "That's not what you're supposed to do, you're supposed to be selling trucks."
Right, not fixing people's current truck or telling them how to fix their current truck. Um, but again, that was retail, where you have an unlimited number of customers. In aviation, it is always the best thing to do the right thing for the customer,
Yep.
because even if you lose the sale, you acquire somebody's trust. And when you get somebody in the industry to trust you, even if you lose the sale in the moment, that is worth future sales. That is, even ethics aside, of course it's
Yeah,
the right thing to do, and it
karma
makes us feel
works.
better. Yeah, of course it's the right thing to do, and of course it makes us feel better. But besides that, it is always the right thing to do because we have a limited number of people in this industry. The more of them that trust us, the better. So even if we end up talking somebody out of a sale, I will never get upset with anybody for doing that. That's if you do what's right for the customer. And if that's taking a lower service level, if that is not making a purchase, if that's delaying a purchase for a certain amount of time, and I am not the world's most bloodthirsty salesperson, and there's a reason for that. There are people who would take a different opinion with that, but I really do think that if you're doing your holding patterns right, you're looking for money, authority, and need. Somebody who's going to be comfortable as a customer, who's not gonna be stretching, who's not gonna be, overextended because then we'll lose them on cash flow, right? At some point in the future. Somebody who has the authority to make the decision because then they're not making the decision and having their boss say, "Oh, well, you have other priorities. You can't be going to all these meetings and doing all these things." And the need, if they don't have those 3 things, they're not gonna be a good customer.
And sometimes
Mhm,
who you're selling to may be the right person, but they may want to involve the entire C-level staff, and
mhm.
could be like we're going through one now that wants everybody, and there's like 7 or 8 people that need to say, "Yay, verily," and they haven't all yet.
Right, and it's a family business, so everybody's opinion is important, and, they have to live with each other at the end of the day, so, you know, it's, uh it's more important for them to feel good about it and to do this right, than it is to do this quickly. So, you've started a relationship that everyone feels good about, whether they buy or not. You've invited them to take the next step in the sales process, whatever that is. So for us, it's a consultation, and then it is, onboarding. For some of our clients, it's a demo. For some of our clients, it is a site visit or, something like that. And then the next thing is you keep them engaged indefinitely. Zig Ziglar and Dan Kennedy always say, "Till they buy or till they die." But, till they become disqualified. They get out of the business, they retire, something happens. So we never, ever, ever want to lose touch with somebody that knows, likes, and trusts us. Um, and we don't necessarily want to be always in high sales mode, but we definitely want to keep that relationship going. So the objective is a full, sustainable or pipeline of qualified prospects. And we started talking about this in our team meetings just recently. I know you guys haven't really been involved with that from the ABCI side, but Adila, I know you've been doing this for a while on your own with your own company as well.
I have a question. I used to work at a call center like ages ago, and they would tell us, and they would do workshops for this. That even if there is no need, you have to generate the need. You have to generate the need. So does that also uh, like this concept is also like in aviation that we generate the need?
You can create the need. Not really. So like for vision aircraft records, if somebody doesn't have an airplane, they're never going to keep aircraft records. I mean, it's insane to try to create a need for some of the products and services that we represent. Our clients have products that are very specific. In fact, at one time we worked for a company that did batteries for the emergency evacuation slides that would roll out when you had an emergency on an aircraft. They hit a button, the slide rolls out, the doors pop off, and everybody gets off of the plane. You may have seen some videos where that happens. But there are only 4 companies that these aircraft slides would fit: Boeing, Airbus, Embraer, and I think one other. So they had those 4 clients. We had done our job. There was nothing else that we could do. We cannot sell these slides to anybody else because they won't fit on the airplanes. It doesn't work. So, the products and services that we sell are very unique. Um, if you are in retail, then yeah, you can make somebody feel thirsty and sell them a Coke, by showing desert scenes or whatever, on a movie screen. And, if you look at some of the old Coke commercials and things like that, the intention is to make people feel like they need a Coke. We can't do that. We can't make people feel like they need an emergency slide for their aircraft that they don't have. It's just not a thing. Yeah, so creating the need is not something that we do in our
Um,
type of marketing.
if we like think it think of this way, that let's suppose all these 4 companies, they are doing business with some other company.
Yeah,
Okay, and they do like they can buy the product, but they already have the product. And so in this context, obviously now they do not have the need. So can we create the need here, or like should we uh, put our efforts here or not, like
yeah,
in this context?
right. In that case, we're looking for an opportunity. So, we want to have them in our holding pattern, and we want our holding pattern to be educational, so that they keep opening our emails and everything else to learn more about what they want to learn about and things like that. But so that we have an opportunity when their current vendor screws up.
Mm-hmm.
So if they're doing business with this other company and they're perfectly happy, then there's no opportunity. But if this other company ever misses a delivery or has poor quality, or something happens, or they end up in a fight over raising prices or something like that, then that's an opportunity for us to replace that other vendor. So yes, that's true. We can be in the right place at the right time, and that's a lot of what holding patterns do, is make sure that we are in the right place at the right time. But we can't really create that opportunity. We can't make that other vendor mess up unless we go, sabotage their phone lines or something. We're not going to do that. So, um, ethically, we're just waiting for that opportunity, and we will get one. I promise you. Anybody who's done business with any company for any length of time, sooner or later, there's going to be the question come up: is this the best option? Either because of something didn't get delivered, or it wasn't what they expected, or it was late, or they had to raise their prices. There's always an opportunity. but we can't always manufacture the opportunity. So what we don't want in this case, we don't want our holding pattern to be phone call after phone call. And we've all had that salesperson, that is just ready to get started yet, ready to should we get started? Let's get started, or tumbleweeds where we just ignore a prospect. And it's like the movie set from one of those old westerns where they show that everybody has left town and there is nothing going on and a tumbleweed rolls across the screen. So that is what we don't want. We don't want to ignore our prospects either. So what can we do that is not ridiculously annoying and not tumbleweeds? Um, Before we get into that, there's one more thing, and that is closing techniques. So if you've listened to Zig Ziglar or Dan Kennedy or Sandler Sales or Dale Carnegie or any of the old school sales teachers, they have things like the puppy dog close. Just take it home and play with it for a little while and see if you like it. And you can always return it if you don't like it. um, you know, or the Benjamin Franklin close, which is let's draw a line down the middle of a piece of paper, put all the pros on one side and the cons on the other side. And, if it comes out with more pros than cons, then you'll buy today. Or the thermometer close on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to make a purchase today? Um, those things are just so obvious nowadays because people have been using them for 50 years in some cases. If it goes back to Zig Ziglar, it's and the saying is a tactic known is a tactic blown. So, if you know that somebody is using sales techniques on you, in a lot of cases you'll be insulted, or you'll feel manipulated, or you will feel like, this is a situation that I just need to get myself out of because this person is trying to influence my decision in a way that I don't want them to. They're applying pressure, which I don't want, and I'm, not going to participate in this sort of thing. The people that we're working with are professionals. They've seen everything in the industry. We have to assume that they are experienced people and that they will recognize these things a mile away. So we're not going to do any magic words, any emotional tricks, any other, any kind of manipulation in order to sell because it just doesn't work with these kinds of people. What we can do in order to create urgency is one of these things. So in some cases, there's like a regulatory deadline. Like for some of our folks that sell avionics and things like that, there was um, a requirement that the FAA had to have ADS be out for aircraft to announce where they are in space so that other aircraft can see them. And the avionics had to provide that. They had to have that ability to show up for the avionics of other aircraft to see where they are, for collision avoidance and other things. So that is, I think, one of the best ways to create urgency is just like, okay, so there's this deadline that you have to meet. There's a bunch of options you have to do that, but this is the best option for you, is this particular avionics package. Limited time offers, we're doing this through the end of the year. Limited stock, we have 4 left in stock of this particular item. Deadlines for delivery. If you want this installed by the end of the year, we need to talk now. These kinds of things. Emphasizing the consequences of delay. So, if you want to sell your aircraft this year, you need to get it appraised now. Those kinds of things. Highlighting the competition. Your competition is doing so much better because they have cleaner airplanes than you do. Those kinds of things. Demonstrating value, emphasizing the return on investment, offering bonuses or extras, and creating a sense of fear of missing out. Those are all ways of creating urgency that are not manipulative because they're real. So these are things that we need to look at when we're creating marketing materials for people as well. All right. Other topics for our holding pattern. We want to show, maybe industry trends and insights, case studies, success stories, product updates, innovations, thought leadership pieces. Here was something that happened in the news. Here's what we think about it. customer testimonials, and that's kind of like case studies, except without the numbers. It's more from the customer's point of view. How-to guides and tutorials, expert interviews. Tim Bonnell does this all the time, where he interviews people that are experts in other parts of aviation on his podcast. Webinars and events like this one. Product comparisons, competitive analysis, regulatory and compliance updates. So, some people just take the FAA releases and put them in their newsletter in plain language, so that it's easier to understand than the stuff that the government is putting out, so providing that service and, making things easier to understand. These are all ways that we can educate our customer, and all different bits and pieces that we can use as excuses to stay in touch with them that make more sense than, are you ready to buy yet? Are you ready to buy yet? Are you ready to buy yet? You're giving, giving, giving instead of asking, asking, asking. And that's just a whole lot more, from a customer's point of view anyway, it's just a whole lot more comfortable for them. And it's also a whole lot more likely to make them either our customer or somebody who can refer a customer to us. Make sense so far? All right. So, yeah, and for this exercise, if you can circle, we're keeping in mind. Sorry, we're keeping in mind one of our customers or your own business. If you can circle one way to create urgency, and three different ways to, or three different topics for a holding pattern for a particular customer that you're thinking about. If you've got one in mind for today's workshop, we'll just go ahead and circle that, and then we'll talk about how to build a holding pattern for your company or for that particular customer as we're going through this. Make sense? Everybody's got somebody in mind that they can use? Okay, fantastic. All right, so you've all seen our content strategy. The main reason that we do it this way is because of the holding pattern, because it takes so long to close a sale in the industry. Coke doesn't have to do this. Wells Fargo doesn't have to do this. Retail sales doesn't have to do this. And people will sometimes ask us, why is this so hard? Why do you have an 8-step prospecting process? Can't I just sell? And why do we have such a long holding pattern? Can't people just buy stuff from me if they're interested? Why do they not just buy, and the answer is because of all of the things that we've talked about. There's all these reasons that people have to overcome in order to make a purchase from us. And in some cases, we have to cover 3 or 6 or 8 months of indecision or obstacles and other things. So we have to approach them in a bunch of different ways and for a bunch of different reasons. So sometimes we have to convince their accountant and their CEO and their salespeople and their customer service people and everybody else. And in some cases, it's a family business. So people have different weights of opinions depending on who they are and where they are in the family and where they are in the business and how long they've been there and different experiences that they've had. So there's so many complex reasons that our best bet is to approach them in many different ways with very substantial information. So we start with a 1,500-word article. This has actually changed over the last few years. It used to be an 800-word article, but as the search engines have evolved, as AI has gotten involved, as other things have happened, we found that it needs to be more substantial to be this anchor. So we start with a 1,500-word article, and we do SEO, we do social posts, we do video, we do email, we do sometimes paid ads. That's usually our last resort. We try to talk people out of paid ads, but sometimes people insist on doing them. But what this does is it gives us reasons to stay in contact that prospects will welcome. They look forward to our emails. They open them with a higher rate. They find them interesting. They find them educational. They find them personal. They find them relevant. And if we do this right, we can take that topic and we can make a dozen different things. And you guys are amazing at this, creating social posts and video out of a particular heavy or complicated subject. I know we've talked about this a bunch of times. Every time we do a onboarding with a client, we talk about this as well. In week 4, when we talk about content, this is the type of content that we're creating for you, and this is how we're going to deploy it. Any questions about this? I think this is one of the really core ideas of what we do and how it's different, really, from a lot of other industries and a lot of other marketing methods, marketing madness, and so on.
Yeah, I just run into some post from in LinkedIn where they do their social their content strategy through automation, and the AI will do their um images, their graphic posts, and it is still um it is still unique and authentic if we delegate it to a real person rather than doing it in AI. Because as someone who also in your holding pattern, maybe they get a chance to visit you again, and then they saw some contents that they feel like it's not giving, and it's it's not really now related to their service that they want, because we delegated too much to AI and not into a real person.
That is an excellent example. The internet is awash in shallow, silly content that's not anchored to anything. Uh, and even in our industry, there's just so much. And I know we talked in our team meeting last month about even a marketing company that is using very shallow, very repetitive AI generated marketing. And this is the antidote to that. Not every post that we do, I mean, if we do like a happy St. Patrick's Day post, it doesn't have to be anchored to a 1,500 word article. Not every post that we do has to be deep and profound, but I do think that most of them do. We really do need to be adding value to people who are just scrolling their LinkedIn. We need to be worth their time. And I think this really gives us a way to do that in a way that they welcome, and obviously they welcome it because they respond really well to it. And this is why we're in business. And, that's been true 10 years ago, and it's true now, that when we do this right, it really makes things so much more helpful and substantive and educational, and really elevates the whole conversation, I think.
Um,
Yeah.
I would like to share the example of BSc, Basque Mask.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So, if we like automate everything, let's suppose we automate the marketing content. Let's suppose Basque automate all the marketing content. The content that will come out will be around general topics related to safety, etc., and stuff like that. Maybe if the tool is very good, it will quote some rules, etc., and stuff like that. But when Jason himself is writing the content, he is giving so many examples. Like, because when I'm creating the newsletter, I read all of that. So he is giving all of these examples, and that shows the human impact of what he is doing, and that he knows what he is doing. So I think so that when we are doing and providing value like this, it is a different it is a different approach. We can definitely use AI to refine the NPs, etc., but the information that needs to be put in should come from a human and not some agent with an API.
Absolutely. And so we do have clients that do all of their own writing. Daniel
Yeah.
Kane, Larry Heinbaugh, um, uh, Jason Stark. I mean, they do all of their own writing, and then what we're doing is just amplifying their writing by doing the plumbing behind it, and adding all of these different nodes to it, making sure that it gets picked up. Um, when we're doing ghostwriting, we need to do the same thing, provide the same quality. This is what this person would write if they had the time. So we have to know their topic, maybe not as well as they do, but pretty close, and we can analyze all of the writing that they have done over the years. We can put in, all of the conversations that we have with them, and we can generate some really, really good ghostwriting that is not slop. It's not AI slop. And we as humans, of course, do the AI sandwich, as John says, where we analyze the inputs and the outputs, and the human beings run the show. And that is super, super important for this because AI is so easy to detect nowadays.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for example, the one with air nurses like Erica, she shared a
Yeah.
PDF where she shared her Erica's tone, where
Yeah.
we always use that for creating a content for her, and it makes her real. It makes the content real and more like aligned to their brand.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's the thing. We also need to do as much as we can to make everything sound like them. This is exactly what they would write if they had the time using their language and their speech patterns and their thought process and their priorities. So um, we had a client a while back who wanted us to never, he was a broker, but he wanted us to never use the term broker. He was a consultant. So, those are different um, little things, that make a big difference in the way people are perceived in their personal brand. And that's why we do personal brand as week 2 in the onboarding process. We need to know our clients super, super well in order to make this deep and not just shallow, silly AI content, right? Okay. All right. So this is the worksheet. Basically, what we're doing is taking one urgency message from page 7 that you circled and 3 other topics from page 8, and you're gonna write those down on this sheet in your workbook, which hopefully you printed. And, what this does is it gives us the opportunity to come up with some really great content that we can put into a holding pattern for our client. So I'm gonna move on while you're writing, and, we'll keep going with that. So, what do we do with this stuff once we have it? We have one urgency message, and we have 3 different types of topic of content, thought leadership or whatever it is. What do we do with it? How do we deliver it in a way that's going to make their holding pattern very powerful and effective? So, when you're flying an airplane and you approach an airport and the airport is busy and you're talking to the tower and you're saying, "I'd like permission to land at Salt Lake City International." They will almost always tell you, especially if you're a little bug smashing 172 and you're not one of the big airliners or, big airplanes, they're gonna tell you to go cool your heels for a while because they have more important people than you that need to land. So they're gonna tell you to enter the holding pattern. And there's always on the aeronautical charts, there's an entry point for the holding pattern, and then there's like a circle that you go around like a racetrack and until they're ready to bring you in for a landing. So, all of the other planes that are in the pattern have landed, the runway is clear, everything is safe for you to come in. So we do the same thing with clients that are not ready to buy yet. There's an entry point for the holding pattern. What do we do to kind of mark the point that, okay, now they're in the holding pattern? And then we connect with them on social media, we meet with them at events, we call them on the phone, we send them printed things, we send them emails, and, they may go around and around and around the circle, um, hopefully without repeats, but, with repeats of the plumbing, but not repeats of the topics. 5 times, 7 times, 12 times, however many times they have to go around this circle. John.
And you can have as many prospective clients as you need doing this. Just like airplanes,
Mhm.
when they're getting ready to land at a busy airport, they will stack them at different altitudes, and you can have as many as 20, 30 airplanes doing the same thing, the same place, just different altitudes, and then they just ask them to come down when they want them.
Right. So, like the Kentucky Derby or the Super Bowl or Oshkosh, those are some places where they have a bunch of airplanes coming into land at the same time. And so they have this whole system where ATC is just telling people enter the holding pattern at this altitude or this altitude or this altitude. And they just stack them up like a wedding cake.
Yeah, they do. And in fact, they call it that.
They call it a wedding cake. And, you basically just keep going until they tell you, okay, we're ready for this tail number, now you can come in and land. But as a company, we like to have lots and lots of people in our holding pattern. And all of our clients should have lots and lots of people in their holding pattern. Because what that does is as soon as the client is, and usually in our case, in the case that I was telling you about at an airport, it's ATC or the people in the tower that tell people, okay, we're ready for you. You can come land now. In the case of marketing, it's a little bit different. It's usually the client that says, okay, I'm ready to get started as a client now. So then you can bring them in to land. So they're the ones that say, hey, okay, let's get started. And then you can say, okay, let's pull you out of the landing pattern or out of the holding pattern and bring you into the landing pattern. And that would be like our onboarding process, or, for some of our clients, it's just simply making a purchase. But that's what we do for our holding pattern. And we want to make sure that there's not a lot of repeats in here, not too many social posts before there's a event or a phone call or an email or something like that, so that it's not all the same thing all the time. And the reason for that is because if it's only on the internet or only email, then we only exist in one dimension for that client. And we want to be three-dimensional people, and we want to be a three-dimensional company that they trust. So we like to send things in the actual physical mailing. We like to do all of that. So we want to circle at least 3 of these message delivery systems. So for some of our clients, they have an email newsletter that we can use. Some of them make phone calls, some of them never make phone calls. Whatever it is that they can and will do, what that client is willing and able to do. Some of them do trade shows, some of them do postal mail, some of them do webinars. Whatever they can and will do, we want to have at least 3 of these for each of our clients. And for some of our clients, we're only doing social posts. That's a problem. It would be so much more effective if we were doing at least 3 different methods of marketing for them. Because again, that makes them three-dimensional in the minds of their clients and is just 1,000 times more. Um, if I've met somebody at an event, for example, at a trade show, they're 1,000 times more likely to open my email because they know who I am. And we've talked and we've made a connection. So these things compound each other if we have 3 or more of them. All right. So this is our holding pattern. Um, so the first thing that happens is, people request a consultation. And what they get out of that is they get a consultation, they get the recording of the consultation, and they get some reports. I run some reports from SEMrush and things like that and send them to them. I mail them in an information package that comes via postal mail. If they schedule an appointment for a consultation that's far enough in advance, I'm going to send them the package in advance so that they have it before we meet. I'd connect with them on LinkedIn. So these 3 things happen pretty quickly, usually the same day. If they've scheduled a consultation, I send them a package in the mail. I connect with them on LinkedIn. We do all of those things. And then weekly, they're going to get an email newsletter from us, our Marketing Mondays. Monthly, they're going to get how-to guides and tutorials like this one. This is a webinar. And they also get the printed workbook. They get other things like that. Quarterly, they get product updates and innovations. I try to call everybody on our holding pattern at least quarterly. And annually, we have a networking breakfast at NBAA. So that's an in-person event. So this is the holding pattern basically for ABCI. In a nutshell, this is kind of simplified compared to what it is for real. But this is the holding pattern that we use. And we've evolved this over the last 10 years, but we've done pretty much the same thing pretty successfully for about 10 years or more. We've added a few things to it over the years, but that's where we are. For each of our clients, we would like to do the same thing. So for the client that's in your head or yourself that you've been working on for this workshop, I'd like you to fill this in as well. What do you do when they request it? What's the first step in their sales process? Is it a consultation or a demo? If we don't know what this is, then it's probably something we should ask about in their office hours. Um, what is the first step in their sales process, and what do they do when they do this? What's their sales process? And this is where this is a collaboration because we can't do this for them, but we can make it easier for them. So if we can help by documenting their process and providing them with the materials that they need in order to do this. So, providing them like we did for aviation propellers, where we've got the mailed package that they can send when somebody requests information. That's part of what they do on request. What do we have in this section? What do they do weekly? What do they do monthly? What do they do quarterly? And what do they do annually? And they don't have to have all of this filled out, but the more they have, the better their holding pattern is going to be. And, for all of them, at a minimum, we do the social media. For all of them, we could do more. And, in some cases, that's going to require them updating or upgrading their services. And in some cases, that's going to require, them telling us some more information about their sales process and other things. But we certainly could do more for all of them. We could do more for ABCI, and the more we do, the better. In fact, we just added, the events to LinkedIn. I just found out that I could do that without hosting the event on LinkedIn, which we've done in the past with disastrous results because the LinkedIn infrastructure for LinkedIn Live was not what I was hoping for last time we tried it. But now we can use that to promote our events without using it to host our events. All right. So then how do we know if it's working? Of course, we're doing our scorecards for clients, and we can look to improving those scorecards with better KPIs. But the things that we can measure, audience size and engagement. Angel, you're doing those LinkedIn scorecards for everybody every month, and I think that's made a big difference in how they're paying attention. Um, W. Edwards Deming, the process guy, says what gets measured gets improved. And sometimes it's subconscious, just the fact that you're keeping track of it. Just like your checkbook, you start looking at your bank accounts every day, and then you start behaving better financially because you know what's going on. So subconsciously, just measuring things improves things. We can look at their open and click rates for their email newsletters and things. This, I think, is one of the most underrated things that are we should be doing for our clients. We should be pushing all of our clients to be doing email newsletters of some kind, at least quarterly, maybe monthly, maybe weekly. Appointments, booth visitors, badge scans, that's how you measure a trade show, how many people came to your booth. Live webinars, we've got landing page visits, signups, attendance, Zoom stats. For phone calls, there are some software that we can use for phone calls that some of our bigger clients use to keep track of phone calls. How much time did this person spend on the phone? How many dials out did they do? Etc. For postal mail, we can track postal tracking or QR codes and so on. We want to keep as many of these KPIs as we can for our clients, and a lot of them they will have to keep for themselves. But if we can make it easier for them, then we're doing them better service. And I'm going to zoom through the rest of this pretty quickly. So this is ABCI's blue folder. This is what we send to people when they request a consultation. And it has a catalog, and it has that marketing checklist that we talked about. This is what you should be shopping for or looking at when you're shopping for a marketing company. These are testimonials and other things that we have, and so on. You can automate and delegate portions of this using, MailChimp, Pipedrive, HubSpot, Salesforce, etc. There's lots of Meet Edgar is another way that we automate as much of this as we can to make it easier. We never, ever, ever want the machines to take over. But if they can do some things like scheduling or measuring or anything else, anything that we can delegate to a machine without losing quality, we want to do that. And of course, delegating your holding pattern. This is exactly what we want our clients to do, is to delegate to us, because they've got a whole team that can do all of this. So we can build the landing pages for them. We can, figure out what we need to do for their strategy. We can do all kinds of things for them, and you guys create amazing content, not just social media, but everything. So all of that is, and we've got great writers and everything else. And this is what we're doing different this month is we are breaking this down. So next hour we're going to be doing most common funnel problems, in addition to the regular office hours of, what problems are you having? And we'll answer any question in office hours as always, but we want to prioritize a particular element of our monthly topic. And those are for insiders only. So these webinars are open to the public. And, we do want to do what we can to invite more people, get more people to attend using whatever method we can. And maybe we need a holding pattern for our webinars and market them better. But that is all what we do. This is Penn Jillette. I don't know if you guys are familiar with him. He's a magician in the United States. Penn and Teller is a famous act in Las Vegas where they make people disappear and they make buildings disappear and they make cars disappear and they do all kinds of crazy things. But Penn Jillette was in one of the marketing classes that we were in a bunch of years ago when I had long hair. And one of the things that he said was, the secret to magic is I'm willing to work harder than anybody else is, or than anybody else thinks is reasonable. So, everybody will look at a trick that he does and think, oh, that's crazy. Nobody would, the only explanation for this is a completely unreasonable amount of work. And he does a completely unreasonable amount of work for all of the tricks that they do. He showed us one, or actually this was a different magician that showed us one, where he takes 5 $1 bills and turns them into $100 bills. And he showed me exactly how to do it. We were going to do this at our trade show booth. He did it for us, and he showed us how to do it so that we could do it at the booth. I couldn't do it. I just could not make my hands do what he made his hands do, to make this happen. So even though I knew what the trick was, he had practiced it for so many years that it just looked natural.
Magic.
Yeah, magic, exactly. So, in a lot of cases, it's just that number of reps and, being able to do the work that is behind all of this. And that's what we're doing for our clients.
Pretty impressive though to see a $1 bill end up being 100.
Right, exactly. All right, so we're late for office hours, so I'm going to go log into that. But thanks, you guys. We're having, I think these are going really well. And, even if it's training for what we do, then that's amazing. So I will be right back for office hours, and we'll see you in just a few minutes. Talk to you soon.